I'd like to call to order the Economic Development Committee meeting. Just want to give a brief introduction and welcome to our guest with Kenny and Ted and Greg, who is on Zoom with us. Another member of the staff and the press. Good to see Jalen Hurt playing for the Philadelphia Eagles. There we go. I appreciate everybody coming for the. It's good to get an update on economic development and where we are, and just as part of a reminder of what economic development is to the county. Above all, we're about jobs, and we're not just about jobs. We're about creating sustainable jobs at above average wage. That's important. Our incentives are wrapped around that, making sure that we're raising the quality of life for our residents by giving them availability to jobs that pay better. And not only creating jobs, but job opportunities. We need to make sure that we have job opportunities in all parts of the county. Make sure that the available workforce isn't jammed all in one place. So we need to make sure that the jobs are available in all parts the best way we can. And then, of course, creating capital investment and reinvestment, not only by bringing new folks to the county, but also taking properties that have gone fallow or become brownfields and reinvesting in those to make sure that a property that hasn't been creating revenue can now create revenue. So we have to create those jobs and those opportunities so we can reinvest in our communities and spend the money to make Jefferson County a better place to live and work and play. And we do that by making sure that we have good partners. We can't do that by ourselves, and through cooperation and working relationships, not only with the BBA, but also with JCIDA, our 35 municipalities that we need to be working with. And we've done that by working with them with the Mayor's Association, creating the Good Neighbor Pledge, making sure that regionalism and cooperation is working to our highest and best use. On our first slide, Helen, will you go to that PowerPoint and just on our first slide? And once she gets it up there, it shows our partners. There you go. One more. Those are our partners. Go back one more. So recognizing that we don't do economic development by ourselves, that we have to have all these people working together to make sure that we're offering the best opportunities, not only in Jefferson County but in our region. Through Airport Authority with aerospace, Birmingham Business Alliance to help us with new folks coming in, and our BRE opportunities that we have. Of course, EDAA, the power company is a huge asset, as well as Spire, and we're hitting all different areas and all different clusters with Birmingham Bound and Innovation Depot with technology, and then industrial, and of course commerce. Commerce is the lead, and we want to make sure that we're good partners with the Department of Commerce, and making sure that we're doing the things necessary to make ourselves and land available for an inventory long term. So all that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Commissioner Scales to give a little update on where we are with legislative and also to introduce our first guest.
Thank you, Commissioner Ammons and Chair of the Economic Development Committee. We have tax credits that sunsets in 2022. And what we're hoping to accomplish this morning is to be proactive in Jefferson County, getting ahead of the legislative session so that we can express what our needs are and how that will work, not only for Jefferson County, but throughout the state of Alabama. So we have 3 discussion topics, which the first is Amendment 772. Second is Alabama Historic Preservation Tax Credit and Growing Alabama Tax Credit. As everyone knows, and first of all, thank all of our partners that are here with us today, and particularly Mr. Canfield from the Governor's Office. We really appreciate your presence with us this morning. Amendment 772, in terms of economic development, obviously it allows us to be able to use our credit, to be able to use public funds, so that we can be able to assist, whether it's a corporation or just for us to be able to promote the economic growth and vitality, especially within our industrial developments. And of course, this is what will allow us to do that. So we want to make sure we are ahead of that, and I want to be cognizant of the time as well. The next is our Jefferson County landscape. So that's when we're talking about the challenges versus opportunities. We have a lot of dilapidated commercial and residential properties here in Jefferson County. And I'm glad that the chairman mentioned the fact that we have 35 municipalities, and obviously we have 67 counties in the state, but we have 35 cities, and we want to be in a position where with those tax credits that we can be able to make sure that it's accessible and available for those persons who are interested in capital and non-capital projects, that they can become participants by using this particular credit. We know that with dilapidated commercial properties, if it has a historical value to it, then that can be a bonus for our county, and we want to make sure that we're taking advantage of that. The next is the Growing Alabama Tax Credits, which I think is very good, because this will allow those persons who are interested by the section 4018-413, the Code of Alabama. It will allow us to be able to put to the public where they can be able to invest and receive 100% of their donating contribution to EDO projects. And those EDO projects that we're talking about specifically are our industrial sites, research parks, intermodal facility, which obviously we do have in Birmingham, and then your startup companies or your accelerated programs. And these type of opportunities, we believe, will increase not only the economic vitality of Jefferson County, but it will also be used as a way to get citizens and those corporations involved that are interested. I also want to make mention too that as we look at Amendment 772, our historical tax credits, we know that with the historic tax credits, right now there's an allocation of $20 million per year. And we would like to see that continue, if not grow. And when we're talking about who's eligible for those tax credits, we know that there's a commercial cap of $5 million, a residential cap of $50,000. So when we look at those blighted communities, and we're talking about growing from the bottom up instead of the top down, this will allow, that particular credit will allow that to happen. And lastly, when we're talking about that Growing Alabama tax credits, we know that for Jefferson County to remain the leader, we have got to broaden what we're doing right now, and that means taking our talent and matching it with those companies that we believe are going into technology and other environmental type companies. We believe that we can partner and allow us to be able to grow in that regard. So if anyone has any questions, you're more than welcome to ask at this time, but I just wanted to thank the chairman for this opportunity and for us to express as a commission that we are asking in 2020 for a tax, legislative tax request for those particular, and I want to go back over that again. We're looking at Amendment 772, Alabama Historic Tax Credit, and Growing Alabama Tax Credit. That if we can have this as a part of the legislative session as a priority, we will be grateful for it. And so, without further ado, I want to introduce someone that I think all of us have had at some point the privilege of knowing, Greg Canfield. He is with Governor Kay Ivey's office, Secretary of Commerce. He and I have done some work together when I was at the city of Birmingham, and he's doing a fantastic job with the state of Alabama and making sure that every county, every city has a seat at the table. So good morning, Mr. Canfield.
Good morning. It's good to see you, Commissioner Scales.
Absolutely. Thank you for being with us.
Glad to be here.
Thank you.
And let me thank Chairman Ammons and the rest of the Jefferson County Commission, my home county commission. So I appreciate the opportunity to join you. I'm going to try to keep this brief because I know you have got a lot of ground to cover today. And I'm so glad to see that on your legislative agenda that you have Growing Alabama Credit as one of your agenda items. And I'll remark a little bit later about the importance of the Growing Alabama Credit, along with the importance of the Alabama Jobs Act. Both of those are extremely important tools as we approach partnering with you on project activity. In fact, they've both been very beneficial and instrumental in a lot of the project activity that we've had in Jefferson County. It's probably important to kind of give you an overview very quickly about Commerce and what we do at Commerce and how we operate. And again, I'm going to try to keep it quick. If you think about Commerce today, when I first came in July of 2011, I've been at this a little bit over 9 years. Commerce was really just what you would have considered to be the traditional focus of business development and project activity and project management, along with the fact that we are engaged in developing international trade opportunities for Alabama's SMEs. We also have the film office, which we're responsible for, and the Office of Small Business Advocacy. Since the time that I've joined, we have actually taken Commerce, and the governor folded in a new division with the assistance of the legislature to create two divisions of Commerce. One is the traditional business development division, which I just mentioned, and then a second division, which is the Department of Commerce Workforce Development Division. And that really includes AIDT, as well as the WIOA programming that is, and some other aspects of our focus being non-academic workforce skills development and everything that comes along with that. And a lot of that we do in partnership with the education community, as you might expect. So when you're working projects and we're working projects with you and we're partnering with you at the county level, and also with, particularly in Jefferson County and the city of Birmingham, our primary partner for economic development in terms of the focus of projects and bringing everybody together, convening everybody and aligning everybody locally on projects is the BBA. And you're going to hear from Kenny this morning as well. So they're an extremely important part of this. I think the other thing I want to share with you quickly is how have things been during COVID-19 for the state? If we look at the state level activity, you know, just how serious has this been? So let me start off with that. We've been looking at everything, and through August of 2020, Alabama's top 5 sectors for new capital investment activity are automotive, metals and steel, forest products, distribution and logistics, and life sciences medical devices activity. Now, you know about distribution and logistics activity because Jefferson County's seen a great deal of that. And you also are aware of the life sciences and medical devices activity in the county as well. Automotive, from the supply chain perspective, Jefferson County has a very important role to play in that as well. So it's good to see that when we look at 3 of those top 5 sectors that we're seeing growth in, Jefferson County's engaged in 3 of those 5 in a real big way. If we look at commerce today, currently there are about $1.2 billion of projects that are what we call in process. And what we mean by that is we are either in process to execute a project agreement or we are currently negotiating the terms of a project agreement. And that $1.2 billion is representative of about 2,250 new jobs. Now, when we look at the current pipeline of active projects that are currently being managed by our project management team or in negotiation with the Department of Commerce, we see about $2.3 billion in additional capital investment that is represented by those projects and about 7,058 new jobs. We've executed 32 project agreements compared to 36 at the same time last year. So we've seen, in terms of just the raw numbers of project numbers, we've seen a little bit of a dip, but it really hasn't been significant. The automotive sector remains very robust, with Mazda Toyota to the north of us announcing an additional $830 million of new investment in their facility before they've even gone into production, which they should in late 2021. Additionally, the steel industry in Alabama is seeing some major expansion activity with new investments made by AM/NS Calvert at just over $500 million of new investment. And of course, notably, we've seen great activity in distribution and logistics with announcements being made from FedEx Ground, Amazon, Aldi, and Dollar General. I would say that this activity is really important for the state because it actually helped Alabama earn the ranking in Area Development's top states for doing business in 2020 as the 6th ranked state in the U.S. So that kind of is a reflection of where we stand today. I'm not going to go into, because of time, a lot of review of where we've come from and some of the activity that we've seen during COVID or pre-COVID. I am going to tell you this, though, because I think I heard the chairman speak when Chairman Ammons was talking about the importance of paying attention to making certain that we are seeing wages from the project activity that we're creating that are creating a upward pressure or an upward element for raising the average wage of Alabamians across the state, because as we all know, Alabama has historically been a very relative low wage paying state, and I'm happy to say that we're seeing improvement in that. The latest data that we saw measured from the Alabama Department of Labor showed that total private weekly wages have risen by 9.7%. This is over the year at about $941.76 per week. That's before any benefits. Manufacturing weekly wages are up 6.4% to $1,128.13. Private service providing wages are at $895.57, which is up 11.4%. All in all, August in Alabama saw an increase in wage and salary employment that grew by 22,200 jobs. Now, I mentioned earlier that an important toolbox that includes 2 elements: the Growing Alabama Credit, which is part of your agenda, but also the Alabama Jobs Act, which is at the state level sort of our centerpiece and of economic development, pay-as-you-go incentives that are sustainable. The Alabama Jobs Act actually will sunset December 31st of this year, absent any action taken by the legislature. Now, it is our hope that things will come together in such a way that the governor will call a special session before the end of the year. Because otherwise, it's going to be February before the legislature meets in regular session, and that will, with the time that it takes to convene the legislature in regular session and then begin to work a bill in the regular session, that could mean that we could be 2 to 3 months without the Alabama Jobs Act incentives because the legislature did not get the chance to take that matter up in the last regular session because they were disrupted by the COVID-19 pandemic. So it's really critical that we pay attention to that. The Growing Alabama credit has already sunsetted. It sunsetted at the end of last month. So it currently is not available. And we're hopeful that that would be part of the special session as well. The Jobs Act is actually, when we talk about wages and you talk about the importance of lifting the wage and earning capability of Alabamians across the state, I'm happy to report the Alabama Jobs Act has resulted in that very thing. We've been watching how we incentivize companies. When we enter into an agreement with a company, part of our offer is based on the payroll and the average wages that are going to be paid, not only at the beginning, at the entry-level wage, but overall the total average wage. I'm happy to report that thus far, for all Alabama Jobs Act projects that we have paid out incentives for, and for which we have data as a result of paying out incentives, the average wage paid on Alabama Jobs Act projects has averaged $26.30 an hour. That's actually 19% higher than we went into the project agreement and executed with the companies. What that means is that the average wage in our project agreements for Alabama Jobs Act projects where we entered into agreements was $22.05. The actual number has been such that it's paid $26.30. So we're happy to report that our process is a financially conservative look at the average wage. Still, average wages that we're agreeing to in project agreements is well above the state hourly wage, but our actual in practice results from these projects is much better by 19% than we ever anticipated. As we look at the need for bringing back the Growing Alabama credit and for renewing our Alabama Jobs Act, we've got legislation that has been drafted. We're calling it the Alabama Critical Supply Chain, Rural Renewal, Minority, and Women Business Opportunity Act. Now, I know that's a mouthful, but it's very descriptive of what we're trying to do. We've learned a few things along the way during 2020. Some we probably already knew, but I think in this particular year, we've learned a lot of lessons. We've done a great job across the state as we have developed these pay-as-you-go incentives that are much more sustainable than having to rely, as we have done in the past at the state level, solely on borrowing money in order to fuel economic development. Our incentive that we use now, this toolbox, really relies on companies to actually perform and create revenues that flow locally into the state before those companies can begin to enjoy the benefits of their incentive package. It's a much more stable, much more reliable approach, and it's very sustainable. So the one thing that we've been focusing on over the last few years is the fact that we've got, in our major metropolitan areas, like in Jefferson County, we've been doing a pretty good job with project activity. Where we've not done good is in rural Alabama and Black Belt Alabama, where project activity has lagged. So we've been focusing on rural economic development with enhancements to our tools, to our Alabama Jobs Act and the Growing Alabama Credit. At this time around, we want to take that same effort that we've been making on rural and expand our rural focus with some new enhancements, but also to recognize that this is the perfect time for us to begin to meld in, for the first time in our state's history, a real focus on our Alabama Jobs Act and Growing Alabama Credit on minority and women business opportunity. What that means is we will be able to provide bonused up incentives to be able to attract and recruit minority and or women-owned businesses into our state, as well as helping those existing minority-owned businesses in our state grow and expand. Because we want them to stay here in Alabama, but we want them also to grow and flourish here. So we're going to need your help. We're going to need your support. I think we've been a great team together along the way. It is very rewarding to see so much of what we've achieved come together, but at the same time, there's still more to do. Thank you.
Good deal. Thank you, Secretary Canfield. Does anybody have any questions for the Secretary? No? I have one. What's the likelihood of a special session?
I'm not waging any bets. There's a good bit of discussion underway. That to have a successful special session is going to take the leadership and the House and the Senate and the entire body of both of those houses being comfortable with coming into a special session, and the governor being comfortable that the groundwork is laid on moving forward with the agenda items that she would set for a special. And of course, our agenda items would be the two incentive tools that we talked about. And there may be some other business items that would be related to economic development and to enhancing our state's economy that would be important to us in a called special session if that happens. I don't know what the chances are, but we're very hopeful that we're going to build support for it.
Good deal. Thank you.
Greg, as you know, that when you have a special session, sometimes your special session can get hijacked. And so I guess to try to limit it to these issues would be, I guess, the best way to go. But, you and I both know that sometimes other things get thrown in there that can muck it up.
Yeah, and I think that's, Commissioner Knight, part of the issue that we're trying to address. The governor in her meetings and conversations with members of the House and the Senate thus far is centered around, can we come to a area of agreement on moving the agenda forward without gumming it up? We're not there yet.
Commissioner Scott.
Thank you. So I had two questions. The first is, and I'm glad you corrected me, Mr. Canfield, on the growing Alabama tax credit. What do we need to do as a commission, or since we are trying to champion that particular tax credit, what do we need to do to put us in a great position to be a part of, whatever we need to do so that we can renew that tax in this upcoming legislative session?
Well, first of all, it has been confusing to everybody about the sunset of Growing Alabama, because when those two pieces of legislation were passed by the legislature, they did not have the same expiration dates. So don't feel bad about that. We've had a hard time keeping up with that from time to time. Commerce, those are our bills. One of the things that we're trying to do for the last 2 years with the Growing Alabama Credit, we have either met the cap like we did in 2019, and then in fiscal year 2020, we actually had more requests for Growing Alabama than we had a cap for. So we had to turn people away or provide them less than they requested. We're going to seek to take the $10 million cap and increase it to $20 million. And we think that that's important to you and to all of the 67 counties around the state, because
Are you dodging the question, Greg?
I know you're not taking it off.
Yeah, you got frozen on.
Greg, we lost you.
Helen, is there any way that you can send him a message and let him know that?
I'm gonna text him.
Okay. And usually you can make a note at the bottom of the Zoom.
Well, I think, and Commissioner Scales, I think you bring up a very good point. You know, we need to know how we can help, and I know BBA is gonna be a part of that as well. Kenny might speak to it, but how can we be more aggressive towards pushing it? Because, it's beneficial to all of us, and it's another tool that we can use. So I know your intergovernmental relations and economic development will be helpful in pushing that.
Yeah.
Especially in a special session as opposed to having to wait to the general session.
Yeah.
Well, and then, I know too that if we look at general session, and it will make provision for us to be able to have that discussion, especially when I want us to be in the mindset that we have to remain competitive. And this tax credit, I think if we can get it and run with it, will allow us the opportunity to grow in some areas that we haven't. And the other question that I had, once he returns, wanted to get a little bit more explanation on that bonus up incentive. And when do they really see that becoming made available to the general public or online? I'd be interested in knowing that, especially when he's talking about the women and minority-owned businesses. I want him to talk about that just a little bit more. So in the interest of time and the fact that.
That's my question too.
Okay, and in the interest of time, being that he's not here, just know that,
That's
Mr.
a
Chairman,
good
that
question.
I am absolutely interested in that, Commissioner Tyson and I. And then I was also interested in when he was talking about the fact that we are sixth in the nation in terms of best state to do business. And so I want to get a little bit more of how we can have sharing into that, where people know that we in Jefferson County are open for business. He talked about those 5 areas, and I think I may have missed one. I saw that I made note about automotive, metal and steel, distribution site, medical devices, and city paper and forest product. And so being that we have, Commissioner Evans, I know we're landlocked in Birmingham, but if we can develop a system here where we can identify those areas that we know that are less landlocked and see how we can be able to participate in some of what the state has been able to achieve, how do we integrate that into Jefferson County?
And
So that-
there are some other resources that Kenny will talk about,
Oh, I'm
and
getting
Ted.
off into you, okay, excuse me.
But that's a good segue.
At least you know.
That's a good segue, and everybody has been introduced to Kenny, who is our new CEO for the BVA, and so no need for any special introductions. You're just a member of the family right now, so welcome, and I'll turn the floor over to you.
Thank you, Commissioner, and I know this mask is a little bit muffled. Can everybody hear me okay?
Sure.
Okay, so then I'll keep it on. Thank you for being a supporter of the Birmingham Business Alliance. We are unbelievably proud to continue to be the principal marketer and economic development entity for Jefferson County. As most of you know, we also are the principal economic development agency for 6 of our other counties that also surround Jefferson as well. What I want to do today quickly is, pull that presentation up to the next slide, is really talk a couple things. I want to share with you a little bit, remind you a little bit of 2019 results, and Secretary Canfield brought up some of the successes there. We think that's a good platform to really launch into successes in 2020 and beyond. Talk a little bit about thus far what we're seeing over the course of the year. And I want to spend the lion's share of the time really talk about where BBA is headed. We're in the midst of developing a 4-year strategic plan. We've had tremendous community input from over 200 folks from in and around our 7 counties. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about where we're headed. And I want to start with the vision and mission. Although BBA has been around for about 10 years, these words should look a bit different to you as we really engaged our team to think about where we want to head as an organization, and really to promote the vision to create and promote a thriving and equitable economy for all of Birmingham. Those words are chosen deliberately. You'll see as we talk about where we're headed for the next 4 years, this need to create a much more equitable economy from the standpoint of supporting small business, from supporting minority and women-owned business, from recruiting and training workforce. All of those will be key components of our 4-year plan going forward. So we'll talk more about that as we go forward. And the way that we'll create this vision is to improve the lives of all people in and around the Birmingham region by creating and cultivating high-quality jobs, Mr. Commissioner, as you talked about, with better salaries, and a resilient economy to create a better Birmingham. What you'll see as we go to the next slide, 2019, we've been, as some of you know, I was an economic developer back here. This guy behind me, Ted Von Cannon, gets the blame for recruiting me to Birmingham in the first place. But back in the mid-90s, we talked about creating a more resilient economy, right, that wasn't as dependent on heavy manufacturing, that added some diversity to be able to overcome pitfalls that we might see in various industries and in the economy. And we went into 2029 with a tremendous year. Secretary Canfield mentioned the fact that the jobs credit money had been used up pretty early. Jefferson County did its share to use up those tax credit monies. 46 projects, 1,526 jobs announced, almost $1 billion in capital investment. Some of the announcements you guys should be very familiar with in Carvana and National Cement and U.S. Steel and others. Like many communities most communities across the country, lion's share of those jobs came from existing industries. So as we're thinking about our 4-year plan going forward, we can't forget the support for our existing industries. Almost 70% of the jobs were from existing industries, and nearly 80% of that capital investment in 2019 was from existing industries. As we look at 2020, project activity for us with COVID has been down slightly. What's not in here is a recent project that you all approved here in Jefferson County that has not been publicly announced yet. But thus far through 2020, 12 projects, 116 full-time jobs, many more part-time jobs. And as we think about announcements going forward, as we continue to enable this digital economy, there will be significantly more part-time jobs that may pay very well, but our historic economic development reporting has always reported on full-time jobs. So 116 full-time jobs thus far through 2020, and $134 million in capital investment. Of those, about $68 million of the capital investment, and more than half the jobs are in Jefferson County. Some of the projects that you guys know well: FedEx Ground, Truckworth, Kenworth, and the Coca-Cola expansion out near the airport. As we look at the pipeline actually remains strong for us. 43, I'll go back one. So 43 projects in the pipeline. You can see half of those are expansions. From a pipeline perspective, almost $1 billion, with 82% of that being new projects. And a significant amount of jobs. You heard Secretary Canfield talk about in their pipeline having some 7,000 or so jobs. We got 2633 in our pipeline. Significant amount of those jobs are in logistics and distribution. The transportation advantages we have here in Jefferson County are unmatched, and we'll continue to see those projects. What you'll see from us as an organization as we start talking about where we're headed, logistics and distribution won't necessarily be priority for us from a proactive basis. We'll talk about the proactive targets in a little bit, but we think we'll continue to enjoy logistics and distribution projects. We just want to make sure that, one, the wages are higher, and two, that they're using we're on the higher end of the scale, if you will, with technology type distribution projects. One other thing I'll note in the pipeline, when you look at the number of capital investment, a significant amount of that is in the information technology and space. A couple of significant projects in that space that we're working right now that have the ability to be potentially transformative to our region. If you go to the next slide, this is telling you here just exactly what I told you, the significant amount of capital investment in the pipeline in IT, and those jobs. Other, again, gets to the logistics and distribution space. But as you look down the left side, you can see still have a significant amount of automotive jobs in the pipeline. Continuing to work with our life science, life science and healthcare, that will continue to be a big target for us going forward. And on the capital investment side, the other two significant sectors that we hadn't really talked about is food and beverage and machinery manufacturing. So advanced manufacturing will also continue to be a target for us as we go forward. Let's go to the next slide. So I mentioned this process of having several hundred folks involved in identifying where we head. And I think one of my favorite authors is Simon Sinek, and one of his favorite books is Start with Why. And as we try to develop where we're headed as an organization, we really wanted to spend time talking about our why. And the why for us is simple. Birmingham needs additional jobs. When you look back at the decade ending 2018, you look at job growth for the 53 largest metros across the country, Birmingham, and when I say Birmingham, I'm using region, it was in the bottom 10. And Birmingham needs more quality jobs. And so when you look at our percentage of what we call lower skilled jobs or less traded jobs, our percentage in Birmingham was about 29% of our all jobs being in low wage. And some of our competitor regional cities have percentages up at 36, 37%. And so we want to increase the quality jobs in Birmingham. Really have 5 priorities that really bubbled out of this process work. And we've worked with our regional partners in St. Clair, Walker, Blount, Shelby, Bibb, and Shilton to help devise this plan, including Jefferson, to help devise this plan. And priority 1, accelerating quality job growth. We want to double the number of net traded jobs in our community over the next 4 years. That'll put us up somewhere near 5,000 new traded jobs. Primary industry sectors we'll focus on proactively will be healthcare, and in healthcare there are a couple of different pieces to that. You've got the life science, biotech, but we also have this growing precision medicine sector where Birmingham, through COVID, has really been able to articulate its value to the world, being able to identify and develop designer drugs here that are based on your genome. And so those will continue to be target areas for us. We'll also enhance or focus on various sectors of technology, financial technology, given our continued financial presence here. We think has tremendous opportunities. And we've got this growing entrepreneurial and startup community that has really helped us to be able to diversify our community, and we think it separates Birmingham. Third target sectors are advanced manufacturing, which includes automotive. We think as we look forward in the automotive sector, we've got the opportunity to get, in my words, higher into the food chain as we continue to develop autonomous vehicles, electric vehicles. We think that our region is positioned very well, being surrounded by many OEMs and having a significant number of suppliers here in our region, and we're well positioned to take advantage of where the automotive industry is headed in particular. And then, as I mentioned, we'll continue to support projects from our partners at the state, from JCEIDA and other partners that come in the logistics and corporate headquarters space. So those will be our primary targets. One of the things you'll see from us is a much more targeted, proactive effort. We're working now with many of our big companies here in our region to identify supply chain opportunities, who's supplying what products. We're trying to link those together to identify really good targets for proactive efforts. So we're in the midst of doing that now as well. We're going to try to recruit workforce the same way we do companies. And so some of you may have seen our onboard platform that we launched just a week or two ago. That's designed to, in partnership with our HR professionals in and around our community, to give them a platform to be able to demonstrate key job opportunities, but also for people who may be interested in Birmingham. It shares much of the good news in one place about us being a great place to live, being a less low-cost place to live, some of the attributes that our companies are offering with remote jobs, et cetera. And so we'll build on that platform. People who have connections to Birmingham, who no longer live in Birmingham, maybe they went to school here, maybe they've got family here, they'll start seeing things in their digital feeds that tout the good news, what's happening in and around Birmingham. And so we're going to spend much more time and effort partnering with Central 6 and others to really build this competitive workforce. Building a more inclusive economy, a couple things I'll mention there. We've launched a effort to proactively recruit minority and women-owned businesses. We want to identify traded businesses, so people who have companies that can produce services in Jefferson County that can be traded for resources and dollars from outside the county. Identified a significant number of targets there. There are many of the well-known names that many of you know from women-owned minority businesses that we are going to proactively get here to Jefferson County to touch, feel, and see how great it is to do business here. And so we've launched that campaign here this fall as well. We're also working with the city on the VITAL program. Remember, the VITAL program was designed to have companies volunteer in our region to report their minority spend with the Birmingham Business Journal. We're going to help coordinate that program, but more importantly, use that to help build targets for recruitment here in and around Birmingham. The establishing the identity of inclusive and innovative region, partnering with Commissioner Ammons on developing a new regional brand for our region. Really excited about that work. We have not really told our story yet, we think, in a compelling regional, worldwide way that we intend to use this brand for in a long time. And so that will also be part of our rollout here late this winter. And then we've got some things that we want to do to get better at doing the task of being an EDO. And so some of those include national certification. It includes improving our research and development capabilities. We've got a crack research staff now, but as we look and partner with our various entities around, there's some opportunities to improve our ability to be able to deliver research even more timely. So that's us. That's where we're headed. The intention is to, we have not rolled out the components of this plan to our board yet. We will do that on December 3rd. And this will be the core of our strategic plan for the next 4 years.
Kenny, will you also talk a little bit more about Rita? You mentioned the branding, but also there's a number of other buckets and maybe a little bit about Rita.
Yeah, so we have, as an organization, have always marketed for multiple counties. What we hadn't done is really, one, pull them together in a formal structure. We've done that through this process, and we've created the Regional Economic Development Alliance. Includes those counties I mentioned earlier. They, as their engagement helping us to develop the plan, really came up with 5 areas that they really wanted us to focus on. And that is attraction, obviously, and some of the proactive efforts we mentioned there. Product development, so working with our regional partners to help make sure that our best industrial parks have are prominently portrayed and marketed aggressively. Workforce development, so I mentioned many of the efforts there. Steve, marketing
CRM.
and branded.
Yeah, CRM.
Yeah, marketing and branding. So part of that effort is to create this regional brand, how we place it, how we use it, and then create a regional CRM where we're able to share contact resources and really get better at understanding where our connections are. Give you one example thus far. One of our key business leaders in town, as you run him through the program, he's connected to 1,700 different business organizations. And so as we look through that, you come up with a company that has decided to invest a significant amount of capital in Birmingham already. That CEO, this connection is partnered with in 4 different ways. We want to bring that person to town, one, to talk about not only their investment in Birmingham, but 2, they also lead a financial tech company that does business with 3 or 4 of our local companies. And so we're trying to identify more of those connections through some of this regional engagement. And then the final one is, what did you just mention? No.
I mentioned CRM, but that was, I'm trying to remember the last.
Well, it's 4 or 5.
Good deal. Any questions for Kenny and about
I
BBA?
have several, but I'm waiting. Anyone else has any?
And I think also Greg Canfield also came back, so if there are any other questions for him as well. But first to Kenny, if there are any for him.
So can we go back to Mr. Canfield, if he's still on with us?
Must be
I
long.
am.
Oh, there you go.
Great. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, good. So, remember when we were talking about the growing Alabama tax credit, and we know that it has sunsetted, and what Mr. Coleman was so great in his presentation, that he mentioned, and I made a note, he was talking about EDA being an EDO, and based upon the information that I have, is that we can encourage business owners and just citizens to be able to invest, and then they would get back 100% of the tax credit if we have a qualifying EDO that they can invest in. And first of all, how do we do that with BBA, since that's a great organization that has a lot of the things that we are hoping for, and obviously we're desirous of in Jefferson County. So when he said that about EDO, I immediately thought about that Alabama tax credit, because that's a shining example of an entity that's helping with economic development that everyone, every stakeholder can get on board with. Are you understanding my question, Greg?
I think so, Commissioner Scales. So there is a process that is required as part of the legislation that passed the original Growing Alabama credit, and we anticipate that process is going to remain should we be successful in getting Growing Alabama recreated again. But that process is such that you're absolutely right that we identified economic development organizations across the state, and BBA is one of those EDOs, as you are correctly point out, and Kenny's right. What you would do there is, if there is a qualifying project that Growing Alabama can be used for, this could come from the Jefferson County Industrial Development Authority, it could come from the county, it could come from the city, it could come from us at Commerce. But at the end of the day, if regionally you find a project for which you want access to the Growing Alabama Credit Program, you would simply work through BBA to get the application process in place. It goes through a review. There's something called the Alabama Renewal Commission. And that Alabama Renewal Commission is responsible for evaluating all project application requests for the Growing Alabama Credit. So BBA would guide you through that process. Probably the they would ultimately be the applicant for that process, most likely. And once approved, you've got a certain amount of time to be able to open up with the Alabama Department of Revenue a portal that would allow taxpayers, and it can be individuals, it can be businesses, to be able to purchase those credits. And you're right, the credits are designed to be a one-to-one, a dollar-for-dollar tax credit up to a maximum of 50% of that taxpayer's taxable state taxes. So one-to-one credit up to 50% of their annual tax liability for Alabama taxes. It's a great tool. It's been very successful.
Yeah, and so that's why I wanted to get clarification on it, because I think that it would be very useful if a lot more people knew about it. And then we could partner and expand basically that partnership with BBA to help us in that regard. The question I also had for you as well, Mr. Canfield, as well as Mr. Coleman, you both spoke in terms of recruiting those women and minority owned. Now, you have to forgive my ignorance this morning, because typically women fall into the category, if a woman-owned business, typically falls within the category of minority. So you seem as though you all have given more clarification this morning of the difference between a woman-owned business and minority-owned business. Is that right?
There is. I think what we have seen, and there have been discussions in our community about, is the real gap in minority-owned businesses, black-owned businesses in particular, right? In Birmingham proper, 28% of the population is black, 3% owned businesses. And so through Prosper and other organizations, there's an effort in our community to help do some things that are specific.
So the reason why I am bringing that up is because I want to see from the both of you all, in terms of the entities you represent, is how do we leverage in terms of Jefferson County. I noticed with you, Greg, you brought up about the bonus up incentives. With Mr. Coleman, forgive me, but I was taking notes on you too. I don't know if you gave it necessarily a name, but you made specific mention of minority-owned and women-owned businesses and trying to grow okay, so recruitments, forgive me. And so I want to know, how can BBA and the state and the county work together so that we can be able to leverage that? That is an interest to Commissioner Tyson and I'm sure the entire commission, but we're women, so we want to know about that. We want to know how can we leverage that? Because we do have a lot of women that are going into industries that typically have not been headed by women. And obviously we have more startup African-American owned businesses. So how do we leverage that? How do we leverage you both having that as a priority with your entity?
Kenny, I'll start on the state side of this. We are drawing a distinction between women-owned business enterprises and minority-owned business enterprises. And we are definitely focused on the promotion of, in terms of our economic development recruitment focus. We're focusing on racial and gender equality, and we're looking at individuals who have historically been impeded from normal entry into economic mainstream because of past practices of discrimination. Now, all that to be said is we're actually at the state level following the terms and the definitions that are being created by a group of interested and, in most cases, members of the minority caucus in the legislature focused on some of the differentiation, the definitions, to make sure that there's a certain sense that some of the federal laws have been allowed to be gamed, to put it bluntly. And so there's a lot of interest within the state legislature to make certain that we do things in procurement. Now, I'm not a procurement-facing agency, but on the procurement side, to make sure that we are drawing a distinction between minority opportunities and women-owned opportunities and treating them distinctly. So that's what we would be doing. But to answer your question, how would we come together and work together? It'd be the same way as we would any other project. There are going to be distinctions in terms of what you do locally and your targeting of businesses and industries. I'll give you an example. Commerce doesn't have any authority, nor do we work in the areas of retail and those types of, those aren't projects for us. Those are local projects and they belong to you guys locally in terms of how you work them. But we do at Commerce not just limit ourselves to industrial type projects, but also the service sector is important. Anything related to the life sciences and anything in our Accelerate Alabama strategy. If you pick that up and look at it, we enumerate the types of sectors that we are focused on at Commerce, and it's a pretty broad category. So if, you know, as long as a project meets the criteria of being either women-owned or minority-owned and fits the criteria for minimum capital investment and minimum new employment, we should have, and it's competitive. The project's got to be competitive. In other words, we got to be competing against somebody or something in order for Commerce to be able to consider incentivizing. Then we would all work together as a team to assemble an approach to the project locally, regionally, and at the state level, and do it in harmony.
I think what I would add is, if Secretary Campbell's exactly right, we would work together in a way just like we do in economic development projects, whether that is needed legislation, whether that's needed support for recruitment. I have no doubt at all we work together just that way. I'd say in our community, we've got a number of interested parties, business interests, black business owners, majority business owners, et cetera, who are working together to try to identify supply chain opportunities for some of our existing companies, working to identify are there challenges with the way rules are written today that we can help overcome. I think in the event that there is, BDA's value would be to include some of that in our public policy and legislative agendas where appropriate. And so you've got a lot of people right now, I think, with shoulders to the wheel trying to figure out what to do. And we'll be in the middle of that. One effort is to identify high growth women minority owned businesses, get them with great business counseling, if you will, business planning, access to capital, et cetera, and monitor them over a period of time to see what kind of growth we can foster out of those potential high growth companies. All those efforts are underway today.
So my last statement will be, for now, I'm glad to hear this because you may not know this, Secretary Canfield, and for you, Mr. Coleman, but for the past 2 years, I've asked our Jefferson County delegation to look into sponsoring a bill that I think maybe I may need to word it a little differently now, because my understanding you cannot mandate that any governmental entity or any entity has to be mandated to incorporate women-owned and minority-owned businesses. However, whatever that needs to be done, I'm willing to work with our chairman and with you both in order to see that come to fruition. I've asked for that for the past 2 years, especially being that I'm a woman-owned business myself. I know the challenges that we have, and we need to create and cultivate a climate where those kind of businesses can grow because they all pay into the economy. And so that being said, that was why I was interested in that. I wanted to just see how do we move beyond this being the third time I've asked since I've been on the commission about that. So I think taking the mandating, the term mandate out, maybe that is the issue, I don't know. But I'd love to see that manifest itself throughout the county. I think that it would serve us well to be able to do so. And hopefully you all understood what I just said. Did you? Did you, Greg?
Yeah, I think the best way you could do that is to talk to the delegation about supporting our Growing Alabama bill and the Alabama Jobs Act bill, which we're calling the Alabama Critical Supply Chain Rural Renewal Minority and Women Business Opportunity Act. And just urge them, you know, if we have a special session, to support it, and if we don't have a special session, once we get into the regular session, to support it, because it, I think our approach at the state level, you know, we may see different, or slightly different approaches by different communities and by different counties, but at the same time, this kind of begins to harmonize our approach. So I think this is, you know, the state, by having this legislation pass in the form that we've drafted it, allows us to work in harmony more with local and regional economic development organizations to achieve that common goal of making sure that we have real economic growth opportunities for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for that. And there was a reason we asked Greg Jones and Daryl Perkins here. Of course, Daryl is our lobbyist, as well as Daryl from.
Greg.
That's what I was pointing to you. Well, maybe he's better looking than you. I don't know. All right. But there was a reason we invited them here today. Daryl's the lobbyist for the BBA, and we wanted to make sure that they heard as well what the priorities, you know, for us and what we're hearing from Greg and Kenny, that make sure that we are all on the same page and we're all, you know, rowing in the same direction, making sure that these tools in the toolbox remain and are increased. So I appreciate both of you being here. Any other questions for Kenny?
I have one last question. I understand all the talk we've had, but what are you guys seeing that companies from overseas may want to relocate back to the United States, and what are we doing to recruit some of those if indeed they are contemplating a move?
We actually have some projects that we're actively working right now that are companies that have certain operations in certain parts of the world that they're considering reshoring. Part of what we're trying to do in the new update in our legislation is that section about Alabama critical supply chain is really a look to what we're trying to hope to accomplish to reshore strategic PPE and medical equipment back into the U.S. So that's underway. It's you know, there are, in the middle of the pandemic, it's really difficult for those companies to make the decisions on reshoring in a fast track manner, because they've got so many orders. And these orders are coming from all over the globe. So we expect that our activity will continue. I'm not sure it's going to be as robust as people had hoped it would be, but I think by the time we get ready to close out 2021, you know, I would think that we would probably see 3 to 5 projects that are related to that. We got one under our belt, it's out of Coleman, because they have some operations overseas, and they're actually expanding those operations here in Alabama.
Yeah, and we have one here in Jefferson County.
That's true.
So-
That's right.
And I think
Don't leave us out. Don't cut us short.
Yeah, well, that's true.
just from a local perspective, I think one of the biggest things we can do is make sure we're prepared with our sites and infrastructure and our deal-making capability, that we're ready for when those opportunities come.
Good deal. All right. Anything else? We kind of need to move on because we're running a little bit behind. But Greg and Kenny, thank you. If you want to stay and hear from Ted, that would be good.
I would love to hear from Ted, but my budget administrator tells me I gotta work on the budget.
Oh, well, good luck.
Thank you.
Thanks. Ted doesn't need any introduction, and where's David? You want to come on so they can see you?
I'm good. Commissioner, thank you very much. Let me say before we start, I want to commend this community and this board for bringing a young man on that I've known for a long time to be a real partner in economic development. Kenny Coleman, and if he weren't here, I would say this, I don't think you could have done any better. So, Kenny, we're glad to have you as a great partner, and I think we'll get some really good things done over the next few years. As most of you know, JCEIDA was created by you through the legislature in 1995. Your charge to the board at that time was to acquire, develop, maintain, and to some degree market first-class industrial properties in and for Jefferson County. We, as JCIDA, we currently own 3 properties that I want to talk about today, in which 21 businesses call Jefferson County home. The first one is the Trinity site. This site is located in Titusville. It's in the old Ingalls Steel facility. It's about 2.5 miles from the Central Business District downtown, and we are directly directly west of the UAB campus. This is a 27-acre site that we acquired in 2004. This was a brownfield site that we cleaned up. We spent a couple of years and a few dollars to clean that site up and work very closely with the federal government to get all the clarification. In 2018, DC Block purchased about half of the property and built a data processing facility. I think many of you were there at the ribbon cutting last year. DC Block is currently under contract to purchase the remaining property by December 15th of this year, so that site will actually be gone. Let me say, this is a terrific use of this site. This is a very, very high-tech company, not employing a huge number of folks, but the domino effect and the quality of employees is truly outstanding. The next site, Helen, if you allude to, is our Lakeshore Park. Lakeshore Park is really more of a business park rather than a classic industrial park. It's located on West Lakeshore. It's approximately 3 miles from I-65, approximately 1.5 miles east of the Dollar General facility and, of course, the new FedEx facility that's under construction. In this park, we have 320 acres, and it is in the city of Birmingham. Probably about 1/3 of those acres are wetlands, but we've been managed to cut out the other part of the park for businesses. In that park, there are 4 blue chip data center facilities. There's also a pharmaceutical production facility. The bad news is we only have 2 lots left in that park. There are about a 12-acre site and a 20-acre site, and there's one small commercial site up off of the parkway. Bottom line is we have 78% of the land sold in that park at this time. That park currently employs about 350 people. And the great thing about this park, it is has all the ingredients for high-speed communication capability, redundant power, all the fiber you need. So this is a very special park, and not to be totally immodest, I believe it's not the best, the finest data center park in the state of Alabama. Next, we take a look at, we'll call it East, and this is the old industrial park that most of you are familiar with, identified JCIDA. This was the first park, the original park, after we were created as an agency in 95. The site was sold in 2001. This park has 720 20 acres in the park. There are 15 companies that are operating in the park, and they employ more than 2,800 people. There are 4 foreign companies that are operating in the park. It is bordered by to the south by the Norfolk Southern Rail. It's approximately a half a mile from the I-20-59 interstate. This park is 77% full, which logically leaves a little more than 20% of properties left. And very frankly, there are two remaining sites for industrial purposes. And there are also a couple of sites that we believe will lend itself to commercial possibilities down the road. As for the jobs in the park, about 60% of the jobs are manufacturing or industrial. About 40, which leaves 40% of warehouse distribution. The park has basically 2 bookends in Publix distribution facility in the east, and on the west side of the park, and Home Depot on the east side of the park. At this park right now, we're in the final stages of more than negotiating. We have a contractual arrangement pending due diligence. We will sell 60 acres. I would like to say the end of this year, but if not the end of this year, early this year, we will close out the sale of 60 acres at this park. McCall West, this is the new properties that you authorized us to purchase, again, and develop last year. There is 650 acres. I'm not sure this shows very well, but it is absolutely directly due to the west of the what we call the old park or the eastern park. 650 acres. What we had hoped to do is pretty much replicate what is in the old park. Again, it's bounded by US 11. Actually, a portion of the new park is just north, about 230 acres north of US 11, but it is bounded to the south by Norfolk Southern Rail. And let me say that it's an important part that we have more than 3 miles of rail from one end of the park to the other. This obviously gives us a great opportunity for rail services. Recently, there has been a lot of tire kickers. Pending due diligence, we will sell 146 acres by the end of this year or early next year. So overall, we have 204 acres under contract in both parks. Let me say for you from our board that we're not in the real estate business. We are in the job creation business. Our board has rejected 2 very lucrative, attractive offers for 150 acres in the park. The board, in concurrence with Commissioner Evans and the commission, we felt as though this is not the highest and the best use of this property. Frankly, there have been a couple, 300 jobs come along with these, and believe me, the amount of offer was significantly more than what we paid for the property. But again, being in the job creation business, our board, I think very wisely, has said no. So, let's take a look at what has happened.
What was that rejection? What kind of company was that?
I'm sorry, Joe.
What kind of company was that got rejected? You said that.
Distribution.
Okay.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, it's distribution, warehouse distribution, yeah. And again, we do not want to sound arrogant that you just have to meet our standard. We are looking more at the level of the jobs, the pay of the jobs, and the numbers of jobs. One project that we were very much interested in, actually, Commission would have brought 1,200 jobs and paid significant amount. The other ones that we turned down were companies that would take up about 1.2 million square feet and employ 300 or 400 jobs. And that's the difference in, I hope I'm making sense of the quality of the job. So,
Kind of for reference, in the latest Business Alabama magazine, it said the largest industrial sites with rail access and this is all but listed by the number of acres that are available. The Cowley site, which is the site that we're talking about, is second to last. That's the largest acreage we have to offer in Jefferson County. To get an employer that's a 1,200, 1,500 employee job out there, we're in competition with a vast majority of the rest of the state, and we're down low. One of our advantages is workforce, but understanding that the biggest one, South Alabama mega site, is 2,300 acres. That's who we're going up against, and we're only at 251. So we have to show our value in every other aspect.
One of the charges of our board has with us to continue to look and find additional space, and you're quite aware of the terrain challenges we have in Jefferson County. We have looked in 3 or 4 other places and have not. We have looked and continue to look in the county, finding what I call flat developable land, and we absolutely need to have land that's cost worthy, that can be developed, and that is really close to interstate. If you're looking at a classic industrial park, you have to be extremely careful about its location in regard to traffic, moving traffic on and off the interstate. So finally, what has happened in 18 years as a result of your investment in JCIDA? Well, more than 5,000 new jobs have been created. Annually, salaries of more than $250 million every year. The county taxes are exceeding $15 million every year, and the value of output is $900 million. We have 217 acres under contract, and that's including all of the projects that I talked about. Those should close within the next 6 months. So while this is wonderful news, we're going to continue to need your help, because as projects come in and we develop them, we have a commitment to provide infrastructure, and that means roads and sewers. So please, while we're celebrating the wonderful things that are happening, we're going to be continually held to the fire to be able to produce the support to help these new businesses. So we will continue to look for new land in the county, and that is somewhat of a charge to find enough land for a classic industrial park. We appreciate your continued support. So.
Good deal. Any questions for Ted? Ted, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I'm going to kind of run through the rest of these. There's one part, because we're running a little bit late, and go through these real quick. Talking about our clusters, Greg Canfield called them sectors. It's the same thing. Our focus is advanced manufacturing, technology, bio and life sciences, and then our focuses are brownfields, BRE with our current access, and regionalism. Advanced manufacturing, of course, is automotive and aerospace. If you take a look at the next page, the big plus out in McCalla that we have with our park there is the location of it next to the rail. Where we are with the rail, and I know Ted's working strategically with the rail folks to make sure that we have expansion at that intermodal facility out there in McCalla. But you see, with all the other railroads that we have coming through Jefferson County, we are a hub, and we need to expand on that and make sure that we're out there for business. On the following page is where we are. It was mentioned earlier about our relationship with all the other manufacturers, and we're in the heart of it. We need to make sure that we can harness that, and I know Kenny's working towards that in how we're a little bit more aggressive about going out and making ourselves available. And now, if you'll be quick, on brownfields, Faith is going to talk a little bit about brownfields and why they are so important. And that kind of is a good follow-up to what Ted was talking about is we don't have any land available, and how can we make it available?
Yeah, hey Commissioners, I'll be really brief. But first I wanted to introduce Keith Strother. He works in one of Dr. Hamilton's departments, Community Services and Workforce Development. You've been here in the county since '06, correct? Okay, awesome. So Keith actually looked at brownfields back in '06 and continued on, and we both got to attend the National Brownfields Conference together and got to talk a little bit more about it. And the sheet that you have in front of you is actually a combination of a lot of things that I've been learning, and then Keith's notes as far back as '06. So point being, brownfields aren't going away. They're the properties that are contaminated or even appear to be contaminated, whether that's abandoned or idle, whatever that looks like. And there are really good resources out there. JCIDA capitalized on that back in 2009. They got $200,000 or $250,000 from EPA, was it right? Yeah, you got the grant, and they cleaned up the Trinity site, which is now DC Blocks. So there are really good resources out there. Would love to kind of, talk through more of these points at a later date when you all have a little bit more time. But if you have any questions, Keith or I are both here to somewhat answer as much as we can, or research the answers that we don't know, and speak with our partners at EM.
And I guess the key in this is, well, this is good information to where if there is a brownfield site in one of your districts, you guys know your districts well. If there's a site there that you can identify and either get to Keith or Faith and make sure that we know it so we can add it to the inventory. Currently working with not only with BBA but Alabama Power on identifying these properties and making sure that we get them on a list so we can not only look at helping advertise those for development, but maybe, pulling some of them together and making master development out of it.
And there's some fact sheets are made and included as well, if you have more questions.
On the back.
Do we have a listing of where those brownfields are in the county?
Yeah, so I have a list that's not complete. I know that it's not complete, but it's a master list that we just kind of started building, but we could send it to you for sure. It's a
Well,
larger
I
file.
know that brownfield isn't a real high use term when you're recruiting industry.
Yeah.
So,
But
But
if-
the term landlocked has been thrown around a lot, and I think there are benefits of using them. Like you can utilize existing infrastructure rather than, building more infrastructure, which is a big point that I think is often
Oh, I
missed.
agree.
So,
yeah.
And we've had some success, not only the Trinity site, but also recently with some, with Baker's Row over in Parkside, some student housing and some other housing opportunities, taking properties that were useless and now they're going to produce revenue for us long term. So,
One point Keith had that, I don't know if this is the last thing I'll say, but that I thought was just a really insightful look was that often these were big industrial sites that were centered in the middle of the community, Inslee Works, for example. And a lot of the community was built around that. So it's kind of the missing puzzle piece often to really revitalizing the entire area. Or the former Caraway Hospital, for example, is kind of that missing puzzle piece over here near the stadium. And so, yeah, I think sometimes they're the big missing piece to a larger deal, so.
Good deal.
Even when you're looking at recruiting properties, if you're gonna call it brownfield, the more you know about the site, the more likely you'll be able to get someone to take advantage of that facility.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, the extent of rehabilitation needed and the cost involved is, just brownfield to say it's a brownfield is one thing, but if it's a brownfield that requires a minimal cleanup,
Absolutely.
a rehab,
Right.
that makes it work, so.
Right, and with the loose definition of a brownfield being real or perceived contamination, many things can be a brownfield, but it actually couldn't have a lot of remediation needed. And ADEM does do a free-phase one, which is something that people often don't know, so.
And oftentimes, the perception is much worse than the
Absolutely.
reality of the site.
Yeah,
That's right, agreed.
so.
well, and we've got a huge, I think it's 1,500 acres available, not available. We have 1,500 acres that's at a brownfield called Inslee Works. Everybody's familiar with that. So, if we can find other properties like that we have the ability to work with the owner and go out and help clean up, then we're winning. And then we throw it over to Ted and make him do all the work. Good deal. All right, next one is going to be short, is our county incentives. You also see the sheet that also has the state incentives on it. Othel's going to go over that real quick.
Okay, first of all, I want to thank the commission for being so aggressive and having a heart for economic development for Jefferson County. But our ultimate goal is to let businesses and our partners know that we are open for business and we're in the game. And ultimately, our job is to make it easy for them to do business in Jefferson County. Because we usually don't choose where they go or if they come here, but we want to put every resource that we have on the table to make it easy for them to do business. Our ultimate goal is to provide sustainable jobs and revenue. And historically, we look at deals individually. Well, I won't go, there's a sheet in your packet that goes over all the individual incentives. I won't go over the states or AIDT's incentives, but basically we have 3 incentives. We first have the jobs incentive, and then we have a statutory abatement incentives on sales and use tax, on building materials and equipment during the phase of the construction project. And then we have 10-year, we historically have only went up to 10 years on non-educational personal and real property taxes. We have been at the table over the last 5 years in 90% of the projects probably that went on in Jefferson County to try to work with our partners to put a comprehensive package together and make it competitive to try to win a project. We are available to come to your offices or your staff's offices to go over any of these incentives if y'all want more detail on the incentives. Just briefly, the Jefferson County, what we have historically required is to be, for the company to be a new company, to provide 50 new jobs and at least $50,000 a year in salary. And we can go over, like I say, further details. They're self-explanatory on the page. And if you have any questions, we'll be happy to, I'll be happy to come, or somebody in our office. And we all work, Faith, Steve, Daniel, we all kind of work together, work with Sean, the legal department. We try to work with, and Scale's office now, trying to put these packages together. We'll be happy to bring you up to date on projects or go over incentives with you. Thanks.
Good deal. Any questions? Good deal. The last item that I have would require executive session to discuss the purchase or sale of property. I've already run this by legal. I don't anticipate that it would take more than 25 minutes. I'll shorten it. There would be no action required. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right. So I just need a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
Do I have a motion? I have a second? Is there a second? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, thank you. Thank you for being here, everybody.
Where will it be?
Right here. We don't have to move. We just need everybody else to leave. No, Faith and Othel need to stay.
Yeah.
Faith, thumb drive.
We all start?
Yes.
Thank you, ma'am.
Good name and character.